So on that note, I'll tell you a little bit about Ralphe. Ralphe Steele completed a year of intensive practice as a Theravada monk in Myanmar and Thailand. Born on Pawleys Island in South Carolina, Ralphe began his meditation practice while in high school in Japan. He studied with Tibetan masters the Venerable Kalu Rinpoche and Lobsang Lhalungpa. Ralphe spearheaded the establishment of annual retreats for people of color at Spirit Rock Meditation Center and Insight Meditation Society. He's the author of Tending the Fire, The Path of War and Meditation. Thank you, Ralphe. Wanted to invite you on now. And thank you so much for being here with us today. Look forward to your talk.
Thank you. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Let's take this into what we do so well in our practice. What practice, one essence of the practice is learning how to train our mind for awakening. Getting your bones, let's begin with your bones. Getting your bones in a upright position. A nice physical posture that fits you. And from there, let's move to our feet. From our bones and our feet, on the breath, in breath and out breath from the bones, moving to the surface, breathing out the tension on the out breath, on the in breath coming back to the bones, going up to the calves. On the out breath, very gentle through your nostril, in and out, softening. Then our thighs. Pelvic. Low back. Upper back. Belly region. Chest. Shoulders or shoulder girdle. Arms. Neck. Face. And our head. The entire body. Let's be with that for a moment, please. You're invited to, just with the body. You may find you may want to make some inside adjustment, or the body does. Allow it to do so. Let it teach you our bodies. Now, if you haven't already, letting your awareness land on the breath ever so gently. Notice how it's breathing, like observing an infant child, noticing how it's breathing with a lot of compassion, happiness, or joy, that kind of intention or attitude, security, boundaries, watching out for it. And as you notice the breath, let the breath, within the breath, within the breath, if you can, go inside. Let it take you inside. If you can allow yourself, going past all your boundaries, all your belief systems. Don't leave the breath. Let it be your guide. The in, the out, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Enjoy. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay. I want to begin this Dharma talk here on racism in the Buddhist Sangha. You will occasionally see my eyes look down at my notes that I put together in the last few minutes, 10 minutes before I came on here. And to put things in perspective, of course, the word race goes way back. It's way old, back to ancient times. But believe it or not, racism is a word that actually came on board around the 1930s, actually 1936. Racism, 1932. There's a manuscript or book, American Race Problem. It was published in 1938. Now, one thing our Buddhist Sangha, as the teachings of the Buddha, it's regards to looking at cleansing our own consciousness. Consciousness, that which knows each one of us, for awakening. The origin of here in America, talking about the birth of the country, which some of you may know. Remember, I'm talking about consciousness now. A white Puritan society came in and uprooted the native population that was here, that came to be known now as the Native American. And that's in the 1700s. And I mean uprooted. Shortly after that, they began to settle here, that particular consciousness. And to help them to settle, they went around the globe to get people to support them. Asian Americans came to be known now, as well as Africans Americans. As time went on, of course, with regards to, let's just say, African Americans would begin to get their freedom in the late 1800s. But there was still this tension that was going on. And understand, most of us, including myself, wasn't even born yet. And so we were birthed into this consciousness, this collective consciousness of racism. I want to keep it simple. It can be much more complicated. At a certain point, let's go up to the 60s, there was a rebellion. Most known, most common word was the 1960 riots around the country. Basically a rebellion. Also around that time, Congressman McCarthy was trying to put together a document to send all African Americans back to Africa. That's just one of many, many things that help to contribute or validate for your consciousness racism. Now, presently, and this is within racism, I'm 68 until next week. But there's a new generation in high school that don't even like to be called gay or lesbian or queer. They're just who they are. So there's that that's going on within racism, besides other sorts of gender inequality, especially with the feminine and the masculine world. Now, with that said, is to understand if you're a non-person of color, if you're white, in other words, you can step in and out of the racism. You can step in and out of this consciousness or in and out of this behavior. That's a personal decision. Myself, I don't know what it's like to step out. And no other person of color don't know what that feels like. Because we were born into it. So, with that said, some people said there's the elephant in the room. And so you can become comfortable with the elephant in the room, stating that I am not racist. And that may be totally true to a certain extent. The other extent is that we were born into it. So it's genetically, it's in our consciousness. And we as Buddhist practitioners should be aware of that. The quintessential of the Buddhist teachings is the Four Noble Truths, which is not to be taken lightly. Because quintessential itself means that it permeates everything. Everything it permeates. So I don't want to talk much, but I just want to set the stage as clear as I can. Siddhartha was teaching us how to be our own physician. And there is this disease, there is this illness, and it needs to be addressed. Not one human being can address it because it's been going on way before our lifetimes, like I said. No, not Gandhi, not the Dalai Lama, not Nelson Mandela. They can seriously inspire the culture, but can't change it. So if we want a change to happen, then we together need to go into the surgery room as a physician carrying the Four Noble Truths and begin to have a discussion. Twice a day, I remember, in all the Theravadan forest monastery, within this chant is Yadidam Chatari Purisa Yugani Atapurisa Pugala. The four pairs, the Four Noble Truths, the 8 kinds. These are my closest disciples. I met monks that was working with right action, for example, for like 4 years. And he said, Ralphe, Punyananda, I'm getting ready to move on to now right speech. I'm going to take that on for a while. So it's up to us personally to begin to address this. With that said, without giving any teachings on the Four Noble Truths, because you should know it from your perspective, and I want to allow time, this particular time, to address your questions. So if there's some unclarity in my communication, so we can clarify it. So, questions, comments?
So if folks have questions, you can type those into the chat field, and then I will read those to Ralphe. I'm actually going to keep you spotlighted, Ralphe. Let me see if I can just change that.
That's okay. I'm just looking for some battery here.
All right. Yeah, so I can kick off the questions if that's helpful. Let's see. I'm wondering how do we cultivate the conditions for a more integrated Sangha by creating not just spaces that typically feel similar to the spaces where white people normally operate in, but with a few more people of color, but actually Sangha and centers where white dominance doesn't suffuse the space. I think that there may be a couple of different theories of thought. And one of those is about inviting people of color to create spaces for people of color, where there's a temporary segregation created by choice, which creates a safe space for free of oppression. And the other school of thought seems to be, creating spaces that are shared by everyone in the Sangha, where you're having a true representation of all different backgrounds and races. And I'm just curious, what would be your suggestions? Because I think this is an issue that many Sanghas are faced with, if not all of them.
Good question, and I'm glad you brought it up because it saved me from bringing it up. Presently, like you said, there's teachers being trained, and for that purpose, hopefully they're thinking because of that will bring more people of color into the Sangha. And the Sangha, the community, Sangha has been also encouraged, some of the communities or some of the centers has encouraged the Sangha to bring in people of color. Now, as an elder, as a person that had some mileage in my body, some time, any one of you who are around my age remember when they did the busing. Now, it's not a good thing or a bad thing, but busing mean they began to bus people of color over to white school district and the other way around. And that was it was good with regards to creating a diversified race. However, it didn't do anything to racism. And the reason why I'm mentioning that, because this is a similar thing that's happening now. Just because you bring people of color as a teacher, which is a good thing, and trying to integrate your Sangha, is that going to take care of racism? No. Because I'm talking about a disease, an illness, the first noble truth, and it needs to be addressed. And no one person can address it. And I can talk more about that, but that actually is taking care of both of your questions there. And it's good that's what's presently happening in the Buddhist Sangha. However, if it's not addressed head on, remember, the Buddha is teaching us how to become our own physician. And so we need to do surgery. There's this illness and surgery needs to happen. It's not going to take care of itself. And I'm not pointing the finger, not pointing fingers at any teacher or any practitioner. This is just an illness. And we as been trained to become or work towards to become a very conscious human being. And we have the skills. It's not that we don't have the skills, but we do have the skills. We just need to have the operating room, have the room. And people need to be in the room, or the body, just like a surgeon needs to have a patient in the room so he can do surgery. Well, the same here with regards to addressing this illness that's been going on for a very, very long time, way before we were born, people. So it's not that, because this is what Ralphe feels the most efficient way to address this illness is to begin to have a discussion and continue the discussion, which I will talk about more towards the end of my talk here. Questions, comments?
Thank you for that.
For example, giving you another, I'm from Pawleys Island, South Carolina, Sea Island. So English is my second language. And it's on the East Coast. Those of you may be from another country. And many articles or several articles has been written by people of color about the island and the culture itself. Recently, someone sent me an email and I went and purchased it. It was in the New York Times. I can't remember if it was in the Sunday Times yesterday, but it was in the New York Times very recently, of a lady and her family visited the island, not Pawleys Island, but one of the islands there. There's 16 islands. And she talked about the culture. Same kind of conversation as with regards to the writing. And it made the New York Times. A lot of people was talking about it. Why? Why it made the New York Times? Why a lot of people was talking about it? Because another culture, another race. She and her family was white. Another race, we're talking about another race in a very kind and conscious way. So people was listening because she was talking a language in her writing that reflects more with the consciousness of the race she was born into. We all speak a different language, each one of us. You can talk to any linguistic about that. If you don't understand that, you know, people in London speak a different language than the people in the US. The people on the West Coast speak a different language on the East Coast. Or one state to another state, one city to another city. And the closer you look, it all depends on how good you can listen. So there's this illness, and for awakening, just to have a discussion, and I've been reflecting, talking to my board about this and other people, practitioners, specifically white, I wanted that to hear their feedback before I even brought this conversation to you. That yes, this is a much needed topic, and it would be very fruitful and beneficial for each individual, because you don't know what's going to happen. It's just like you will be going into a retreat with inside yourself, talking about an illness and how to address it for yourself. Comments, questions? I'm glad you can hear me, because I just found this one battery and my thing is blinking.
No, your sound is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
And would it be? We're kind of running short of time, but I just wanted to ask this: are there specifically like actions or attitudes that you can name that discourage people of color from thriving in our sanghas?
Well, I'm a trauma specialist as well. And so not just people of color, but we all have been traumatized more than once. And it's like, well, traumatized, period. And so anyone that's been traumatized, just feeling it, forget about any words coming out of your mouth. Excuse me. Just feeling the sensation can trigger someone, can trigger each one of us, and we all have been triggered. And if you don't feel comfortable, then why would you go and be with a community where you don't feel comfortable? And how can that community make themselves feel comfortable? Whoa, I'm trying to get to that, and helping all of us to have this kind of conversation, because it brings up a lot of fear in all of us in having this kind of conversation, because what does it do? It does exactly what the essence of the teaching is trying to get us to become, and that's transparency. And that's huge. And if you're looking at age, if you're under 50, that's a big, big, big deal. If you're over 50, and especially over 60, then you don't care. because you see death more. Death, the distance, that's in a linear way, the distance between you and death is closer.
Thank you very much, Ralphe. Just one more opportunity for anyone to list a question or a comment before we wrap up here. I wanted to give you some upcoming highlights of what's happening in Ralphe Steele's world and things he's going to be bringing to us. Okay. Well, thank you. It's really incredible to become aware that the work that is needed to transform racism in our sanghas it's a dialogue, and I imagine that dialogue will vary according to the conditions that we create in our sanghas and our spiritual communities. If you'd like to show support for Ralphe today, please offer what you can as dana. The link is still there in the chat field, and keep in mind that your generosity can help strengthen the recovery community and to grow the academy, and can be a practical expression of gratitude and metta. So we have 4 upcoming events that I wanted to mention, and since they are a little lengthy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them into the chat field, and I will leave the window open after we close here. And but just to give the highlights of them, Ralphe will be organizing a group of, say, 20 to 30 individuals to begin a dialogue regarding healing racism in our Buddhist sanghas. And it will take place online, most likely using a platform like Zoom. And so the info I put up will have Ralph's email address, and you can email him with the subject line healing. And then there will be a decision made about when that will begin. And I'm sure that will be an ongoing discussion. Also, you're beginning some Sunday sits. There are 2 upcoming dates that have been determined. One is May 26th and the other June 30th. And on those dates, the sits will be throughout the day, from 9 to 11, from 2 to 4, and from 5 to 6, with an open discussion between, I think, 12:30 and 1, is what I think. And you can email Ralphe with the subject line Sunday Sits. And then there are 2 events involving Thanissaro Bhikkhu, who is a senior Buddhist scholar, a master translator, and author. He will be in Santa Fe on June 8th for a house blessing for Ralph's new home, followed by a talk at noon Mountain Time. And you can email Ralphe with the subject line House Blessing. And then next year in January 10th through 12th in downtown Santa Fe, there will be an urban retreat. And these retreats will be taught by monastics. And Thanissaro Bhikkhu will teach the first weekend, and the cost of the retreat is $200. And you can email Ralphe with the subject line Urban Retreat. And then there's also a website where all of this information can be found. And folks, there are podcasts. We're turning each of these talks into podcasts, so I'll put the link up for that. And finally, if you'd love to join us next month, these are monthly Dharma talks, and Kevin Griffin will be with us on Sunday, June 2nd. Thank you so much for the gift of your presence, for sharing the Dharma, and may you all be at ease. May you all be happy and secure. Thank you. I'm going to list all of that information now, and I will keep the room open so you can copy as much of it as you like. Thank you.